Alrighty, I just start out by drawing a grid. This grid I just sketch out in pencil lightly. It helps me with my sketch. I'm running with off screen. You can see I have actually a computer monitor with Tolkien's original map overlaid with a grid just in GIMP. Maps are an exact science, and having that grid really helps that. Now I'm just playing with the border. There's a lot of sketching and erasing and resketching and erasing, and I kind of do every border its own way. Each map, even if it's each Middle-earth map has a different border. And for this one, I've decided to go with no top and bottom border, and just between the sides because of the style of this parchment is that loose side. But now I'm happy with my pencil sketch, and I've decided to go over with just ink. You see there's a little box there for the title of the map, as well as that's where also my signature will go, but that'll be one of the last things I do. Now I'm going in just adding some leaves to this woven pattern I made, just to give it kind of that Rivendell motif, which I enjoy, and I do for a lot of them. So I'm going to start doing the actual sketch of the map itself, where I'm just kind of working my way up the coastline. Coastlines are a good place to start, just because it helps ground the rest of it. Next I'm doing the rivers, as also the same reason to help ground the actual piece itself. Some maps I'll do mountains first, because they're usually quite large and stuff, but the mountains are actually quite small in the Middle-earth map, because it's actually a very zoomed out thing, and they're kind of one of the more annoying parts of the sketching process, so I mostly stick to the rivers as kind of the guidelines for it. You can tell that I'm actually purposely avoiding doing the Misty Mountains, because that's probably the most tedious part of this, because there's a lot of mountains, and yeah. But actually though, no, Mirkwood is probably the most tedious part, but you won't actually see that till the end. I don't actually do a sketch for Mirkwood. And now I'm just going out doing some of the northern regions. I just did Gondor before, but Gondor is actually very geographically dense. Doing all the north, getting the Shire and the Grey Havens all sketched out. Alright, and now I'm actually going through and doing the Misty Mountains, because I gotta do it eventually. It's one of the last things I did. So now I'm going through and actually doing all of the names and everything, all the major lettering. I go with Tolkien's original spacing, because I am going for a replica of Tolkien's map, and the spacing does really help capture that same feel. I'm also doing Tolkien's original font, which is also the font I'm most comfortable with, since it's actually a very useful font, because it's kind of the fantasy font, if you want to invoke that fantasy feel. And even though it was the last thing I sketched, the lettering is actually the first thing I do in ink. Just because sometimes you'll have to you don't want to have drawn a mountain in ink, and then realize you need to put a Q through where that mountain was. So it's best to do the lettering first permanently. So now just going through, I start with the largest nib, and I go progressively smaller. I mostly use, for the larger ones, I use C3s, or I use a few C2s, then I go into C3s and then C1s, and then I just use a fine tip for a lot of the small markings and things like that. I don't do everything that Tolkien mapped on his original, but I do most things, and most things that are important you'll notice. If my client wants me to have more detail, I'll do more detail, but for the most part, it's not noticeable. You don't need to know every single city in Gondor. Well, now I'm just doing the coastline. This is a quick deal, and all the lakes and seas in line, and then I do all the rivers. It's such a satisfying thing actually going through and actually doing the inking itself. It's a fun process. And now I'm doing that. My head's in the way a lot, but I'm doing all the mountains. But I do mountains in 2 phases. And you'll actually notice that, you can't tell this here, but I actually, for this inking part, there's a lot of gaps where I wait 15 minutes just for the ink to dry. This took place over the course of 7 hours recorded time, and probably over about 10 hours total time. Not counting the fact that I went to sleep. Now I'm actually adding all the detail to the mountains. This is one difference from the original. In the original, the light source is from the east, but I chose it from the west. Just kind of the idea of the setting sun and going into the west and its importance, and within the story of Lord of the Rings. And I just felt it's a bit more fitting. Kind of just the story being the sunset of the elves and whatnot. Now I'm adding in all the little trees for forests and marshes and stuff. Fortunately, Tolkien was not super detailed with his tree designs, and they're mostly just triangles with sticks on them, which is good because there's a lot of trees, especially here. Here I'm doing Mirkwood. Mirkwood took forever. Mirkwood represents about, alone is about 40 minutes of drawing trees. And now I'm just doing some nice, like, water detail, and then finally the actual name itself, my signature, and then just erasing all of my original pencil marks. And, yeah, no, there we go. We have a finished map. As I said, it took about, all in all, about 7 hours. But, yeah, no, I think it turned out really good. I will actually be doing a more in-depth, if you want to check out more in-depth about my process for this, I'm doing a longer video that's about 7 times as long. It's about 25-minute version of this. If you want to check out my YouTube channel, which I'll link somewhere near to this, wherever I post it. But yeah, there's just one thing. I'm actually going to add a layer of stain to this, which will let me give it that parchment-y look, but I'm not recording that because that would require it. That takes place over several hours. I don't feel like recording that, and I'm lazy. But the picture of the stained version will probably be on the longer version, if you want to check that out. But even just in black and white, I think it looks quite nice. So, yeah, thanks for watching this.